I'm the insurance warrior, so I help people find the best treatment for their disease and then make their health insurers pay for it. Or should I say persuade their health insurers to pay for it. I teach people how to do that themselves. I write a few select insurance appeals myself, and I offer them books so that they can learn how to win their own insurance appeals. What I do is important to the patient because if they don't get their treatments paid for in this case, they don't survive. So it really doesn't get any more important than that. And depending how much the treatment costs, even if they pay cash out of pocket for this treatment when their insurer won't pay, they might lose their home, they might lose their children's college fund, and I want them to emerge from their treatment healthy and with their finances intact. In March 2005, I was diagnosed with late-stage abdominal cancer, rushed into surgery, and given months to live. And when they discovered what kind of cancer I had, which was actually appendix cancer, they told me it was rare. And the oncologist said to me, and he said it just like this, "There is no treatment for your disease. And even if there were, they wouldn't pay for it." So I had a choice. Either do what my doctor told me to do and die a hideous and prolonged death from appendix cancer, or become the insurance warrior. So that's how it started. And the first part is not the insurance warrior part, but finding the treatment that would give me the best outcome. Oftentimes these days, patients need to do this themselves. So I went out and found the best treatment, did a lot of research to find out which one would give me the best outcome. Then I had 2 months before my definitive surgery to figure out how to make my insurer pay for it. I spent 2 months reading, researching, studying, late at night, getting free advice. It had to work because by then I'd lost my business, my income, my savings. What I really needed was the finest lawyer money could buy, but I didn't have any money, so I had to figure out how to do it myself. Finally, I sat down and wrote my 23-page appeal. My insurer called my treatment experimental, which is quite common with the most effective treatments. And they also wouldn't pay for it because it was out of network, which is also often the case. The doctors and treatments getting the best outcomes don't happen to be contracted with your insurance company. Therefore, it was not a covered benefit, and I wouldn't be allowed to have it. 3 days after receiving my war documents, the insurance company called me. That was a first. They said, "Well, we decided to pay." They paid everything. I had a catastrophic policy with a $1,500 deductible and a $6,000 annual out-of-pocket. And during 2005, my treatment cost probably about $345,000. And my out-of-pocket for that year was $9. That would be $9. And what that tells you is that everything is possible. And with health insurance, everything is negotiable. I did several things that I believe made them pay. One thing that I did was I wanted to get out of network for my treatment. So I thought the best way to persuade them to let me go was to prove that all the doctors in network were not qualified. And I thought that that might intimidate them at the same time, be a little embarrassing. So I told what I call as my bad medical story. I just naively told all the things that they did wrong, all the tests that they misread, the bad advice that didn't turn out to be true, the wrong surgeries, those sorts of things. Now, I didn't blame them for that. I just, in a cool, professional manner, I related all the terrible, embarrassing things that they did, number one. Number two, I was able to prove that they'd paid for this before. I call this the precedent. Now, just saying, hey, 3 other insurance companies paid for this before, they don't care about that. I did the legwork. I went out into the community of patients and I found 24 people who had had this paid before. And I listed them, first name, last name, date of surgery, very intimidating to insurance companies. And at the end of that section, I said, very intimidating partly because they don't get to do that. There are medical privacy laws, which is HIPAA, but I can do that. I'm a patient. I got their permission too. So I had a list of 12 names where they'd paid, proof, facts, and at the end of that section I said, all I ask is the same fine treatment which you have extended to all these others. Number 2. Number 3, I proved that Dr. Sugarbaker, my surgeon of choice, would get a better outcome than the in-network surgeon who had no experience and no training. I proved it with facts. I went to the scientific articles that he had published, which was over 700 of them, and I pulled out the gold nuggets where he talked about outcomes, and I quoted that in my appeal. I did something that probably nobody's ever done before. I proved that the treatment that I was requesting would cost less than the treatment that they were proposing. In other words, a cost comparison. I went to the unqualified in-network surgeon's office. I said, gee, I'm doing a little cost comparison here. I'm trying to get to Dr. X. Could you tell me how much the surgery costs with him? They were actually paying him more than they would be paying the world's expert. Little cost comparison. Because if you're serving notice that you understand that this is all about money. Probably the most important thing, though, that I did was who I sent it to. Most people send their appeal to Joe Post Office Box at the appeals department, which is what they ask you to do. Yes, I send it there. But why does he not tell you his name? There's no accountability. There's no follow-up. Who is it that's considering your appeal? A P.O. box? You can't march up and down in front of a P.O. box. So, names, information, access is power in this case. So I went and found the 2 people at my insurance company who could approve my treatment with one signature. That would be the president, CEO, and the medical director. These people are not accustomed to seeing appeals. They are very well protected from the likes of us. So big excitement when they see one of these appeals. And then it was how I delivered it. I found their personal fax numbers or email addresses. So that's intimidating, I believe, to insurance companies because they begin to wonder, who is this person? The first thing I do nowadays, if I ever do take on a case, is I'll spend 5 or 6 hours looking for the medical director, the CEO, a couple of juicy vice presidents, and their personal contact info. Then I do what I call the delivery strategy. When I write my 34-page expository persuasive prose, and I find all the right people to send it to, I go in the middle of the night and I fax it to them simultaneously, all of them. Why the middle of the night? So they weren't turned off the fax machine. The next morning, sometimes people will ask me, what do they do after you send such an appeal in such a way? I said, I call it poking the stick in the hornet's nest. I said, you'll get action. They will be calling you tomorrow. That's never happened before, has it? I say they're going to be swarming, and you don't know which way they're going to swarm. So I picture the medical director of the largest insurance company you can think of. Let's call it Acme Insurance. He comes into his large, imposing office, and he sits down in his big fat swivel chair, and he sees this 34-page document on his desk. He says, what's this? And the person who's on the very bottom of your copy list is the actual lowly case manager, which is the only person you get to talk to. So here's, Mr. Big Guy who's earning $4.6 million. He looks at it and he looks who else is getting it. He picks up the phone. They start calling each other. What is this? Handle it, handle it. And they're swarming around, and pretty soon, before you know it, they said, just pay for it. So it usually takes me, because I'm sort of the master, it takes me 2 to 3 days to write one of these 34-page opus, and it takes another 2 to 3 days to get it approved. This is my 50th appeal today. I've won 48 of them, all life-saving treatments, all between $100,000 and $500,000 in cost, and all in a week or less. Why? Because usually, I have to win it in a week or less. They've already lost 1 or 2 appeals. Surgery's next week. Besides, I don't like fighting with insurance companies any more than anyone else. I want to get in, get it done, win it, and move on to the next. So I think it behooves patients to know that this doesn't have to be a 4-month ordeal. It's simple, not easy. One must do the studying and you have to do the work, but these things can be won in a week. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. I don't take any of this personally, and I counsel people not to, because the best way to proceed through all this is to understand that all this is working your way through a bureaucracy. It's a bureaucracy like any other. I could have written a book about how to get things done at the phone company or the government or the army, but this is more important. Besides, it's my issue because I had to save my own life. I have no doubt that they're human beings, but I'm not going to appeal to their sympathies or their emotions because it doesn't work. They see that every day. That's, the begging and pleading defense of, but I'll die if I don't get this treatment. Unfortunately, I believe they're sort of habituated to that. So this is more of a cool, professional, calm, like a chess game. Your insurance company is a huge bureaucracy. It's their job not to pay. That's what we expect. That's called reducing operating expenses. It's not good. It's not bad. It just is what it is. So I say you don't win a chess game by grabbing the board, jumping up out of your seat, and whacking your opponent over the head with it. You want to know your opponent. In other words, know your insurance company. That's one of the first things you want to do. Go in there and learn your appeals process. Study their definitions. What do they mean by medical necessity? You need to know them. You need to be one or two moves ahead. And you need to stay cool and calm, collected. They're absolutely people. But I think within that culture, they can't really think in terms of this is going to save somebody's life or they're going to lose their life. I don't think they really operate in those terms. Nor should they. It's a business. What are the three things people should do when they're denied? The first things that patients do when they're denied is the first thing they usually do is panic. The second thing is to call the insurance company. And the third thing is to call their doctor to help them. And I would suggest that those three things probably don't work very well. Unfortunately, doctors don't have a lot of influence with insurance companies these days. If your doctor's in network, he's not ideally positioned to fight your case. If he's out of network, he has not a lot of influence with your insurance company. So the first three things to do when you're denied would be, the most effective things, would be to study the appeals procedure. You need to know where you stand. The appeals procedure is your roadmap. Number two, find the medical policy statement. Your insurance company has a medical policy statement about your treatment. It explains why they're not going to pay for it. You need to request a copy of it or find it on their website. That's the basis for your appeal. Number three, you need to study the definition. If your treatment is denied because it's experimental, there is no commonly agreed upon definition for that. You need to find your insurer's definition and disprove it in your appeal. Those three things will give you a running start. My role as the insurance warrior makes me feel everything at all times, intensely, for the week that I'm writing an appeal particularly. I go into the trenches with that person and we walk through the fire together. It makes me feel empowered. It's much more fun to be the helper than the helpee. It makes me feel strong. It makes me feel proud. It makes me feel humbled. Each one of these people, my story is pretty darn dramatic, but the people that I help personally are even more dramatic. I love the stories. I think what I'm most grateful for is that I'm given the best stories ever in this. It makes me feel stressed out because I feel as though they've laid their lives on my shoulders when I write an appeal. Now, it's not all I do. I also speak about this publicly. I want the general public to know about this. They don't realize that the train is coming down the tracks for them eventually. So when I speak in front of groups, I feel nourished, exhilarated, amused, inspired. And then I also, there are about 2,800 of my books floating around out there now. And every once in a while I'll get a call or an email, and they'll say, "You don't know me, but my name's Robin. I live in Phoenix. You saved my husband's life." Then I feel blessed. I mean, how fortunate am I to be the one person that knows how to do this? It's a great joy. I've been completely transformed by this experience in every way. I treat people differently. I think differently of myself. My work is different. My relationships are different. But I think more than anything else, it's grown me in compassion.